Nobody dared to save this dying puppy, except for one man. In the middle of a raging storm, traffic roared past as the tiny body lay broken on the side of the road. Everyone looked away, until he climbed into danger to pull the fragile creature back from the edge of death. But this wasn't just a rescue. Burned into the puppy's ear was a strange mark, a mark that carried a secret darker than anyone could imagine. Soon that single act of kindness would drag him into a hidden world of power, cruelty, and corruption, where saving one life could put his own at risk. What is the truth behind the mysterious mark, and how far will one man go when compassion becomes a fight for justice? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Thunder cracked across the midnight sky like breaking glass, sending sheets of rain hammering down onto Interstate 40. Bram Whitaker squinted through his windshield wipers, which were working overtime against the deluge. His tow truck's headlights cut yellow cones through the darkness, illuminating the wet asphalt ahead. 15 years of driving these roads had taught him to stay alert, especially on nights like this. Other vehicles shot past, their tires hissing against the wet pavement, throwing up rooster tails of spray. Most drivers were in too much of a hurry to slow down, even in weather that turned the highway treacherous. A flash of lightning lit up the sky, and that's when Bram saw it, a small shape huddled on the concrete ledge of a culvert running beneath the interstate. His heart jumped into his throat. Was that what he thought it was? Lord Almighty, he muttered, already flipping on his emergency lights and easing onto the shoulder. The truck's tires crunched over loose gravel as he brought it to a stop. Through the passenger window, he could just make out the form. Definitely an animal, probably a dog, laying frighteningly still on that narrow ledge while cars and trucks roared past mere feet away. Bram didn't hesitate. He grabbed his fluorescent safety vest and flashlight from behind the seat, threw open his door, and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit him like ice water, soaking through his jacket in seconds. Wind whipped at his clothes as he made his way to the guardrail, his boots sliding in the mud. The embankment beyond the rail was steep and slick with runoff. Bram played his flashlight beam down the slope until it caught the culvert opening, and the small dog sprawled motionless on the concrete shelf beside it. The pup couldn't have been more than a few months old, its tan fur matted and dirty. "Hold on, little buddy," Bram called out, though his words were lost in the storm. He hooked one leg over the guardrail, testing his footing on the treacherous slope. The wet grass offered little purchase as he worked his way down, one careful step at a time. His flashlight beam bounced wildly with each movement. Below, water rushed through the culvert with frightening force. One slip, and he'd be swept away into the darkness. Finally, Bram reached the ledge. Up close, he could see the puppy was breathing, though barely. Its eyes were closed, body trembling. As he crouched down beside it, something caught his attention, a mark on the pup's ear that made his blood run cold. Branded into the flesh were two characters, Y6. Bram knew what that meant. He'd seen similar brands before, though they were illegal now. Puppy mills and dog-fighting operations sometimes marked their stock this way. The thought made his jaw clench with anger. A car horn blasted overhead, startlingly close. Bram instinctively pressed himself against the concrete wall, heart pounding. He had to get them both out of here before someone got killed. Carefully, he slid his hands under the puppy's body. It was so light, probably hadn't eaten in days. As he started to lift, the ledge beneath his feet suddenly crumbled. Bram's stomach lurched as he felt himself starting to fall backward toward the rushing water below. Pure instinct took over. He clutched the puppy to his chest with one hand, while the other shot out, grabbing desperately at the rough concrete. His fingers found purchase just as his feet went out from under him completely. For one terrifying moment, he dangled there, the roar of the water seeming to pull at him from below. With a grunt of effort, Bram managed to haul himself back onto what remained of the ledge. His hands were scraped raw, but he barely noticed the pain. The puppy hadn't made a sound through any of it. "Okay," he panted. "Round 2. The climb back up was even harder than the descent had been. Bram had to do it one-handed, keeping the pup tucked safely against him with the other arm. The rain hadn't let up at all, turning the slope into a mudslide. Twice his feet slipped out from under him, and he had to catch himself on his knees to keep from sliding all the way back down. When he finally reached the guardrail, another semi-truck went screaming past, so close he could feel the wind of its passage. Bram pressed himself flat against the metal barrier, shielding the puppy with his body as road spray washed over them both. The last few feet to his truck were like running a gauntlet. Cars kept coming, most of them going way too fast for conditions, throwing up blinding sheets of water. Bram waited for gaps in traffic, darting forward in short bursts while protecting his precious cargo. At last, he reached the passenger door of his tow truck. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely work the handle, but he managed to get it open and climb inside. The sudden silence as he pulled the door shut was almost shocking after the chaos outside. In the dome light, he got his first good look at the puppy. It was even smaller than he'd thought, maybe 8 or 9 weeks old, with tan and white fur that might have been pretty if it wasn't so filthy. The branded numbers stood out stark and cruel against its ear. The pup's breathing was shallow, its body cold. Bram cranked up the heat and grabbed the emergency blanket he kept behind his seat, wrapping it carefully around the tiny form. As he did, the puppy's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, deep brown eyes full of pain and confusion. "You're safe now," Bram told it softly. "I've got you." He glanced at his phone, noting the time. He still had 3 hours left on his shift, and dispatch would be expecting him to cover his usual route. But one look at those brown eyes made the decision for him. Some things were more important than protocol. Bram picked up his radio mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 17. I'm going to have to clock out early tonight. Got an emergency situation." There was a crackle of static, then Sarah's voice came back. "Everything okay, Bram? You need backup?" "No backup needed. Just got a medical situation I need to handle. I'll explain tomorrow." "Copy that. Be safe out there." Bram put the truck in gear, already mentally mapping the fastest route to the all-night veterinary clinic on the other side of town. As he pulled back onto the interstate, he glanced at the puppy bundled up on the seat beside him. Something about this felt different, like more than just another stray rescue. This was a line being crossed, a choice being made. All his life, Bram had watched other people drive past things they should have stopped for. He'd done it himself sometimes, telling himself he was too busy or it wasn't his problem. But not tonight. Tonight he'd chosen to be the one who stopped, who acted, who cared enough to get involved. And somehow he knew this was just the beginning. The puppy stirred slightly under the blanket, pressing closer to the warmth of Bram's leg. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cab of that tow truck, a small miracle of compassion had already worked its magic. 2 lives had been changed forever on a rain-swept highway in the middle of the night, one saved from death and one saved from the quiet despair of looking the other way. As Bram drove through the darkness toward help and hope, he made a silent promise, both to the puppy beside him and to himself. From now on, he would be the man who stopped when no one else would. The man who acted when others only watched. The man who made a difference, one small life at a time. The lights of the veterinary clinic appeared ahead, a beacon in the storm. Bram reached over to gently touch the puppy's head. "Almost there, little one," he whispered. "This is just the beginning." The glass doors of Pine Valley Veterinary Clinic burst open as Bram shouldered his way through, cradling the soaked puppy against his chest. Water dripped from his rain-slicked jacket onto the worn linoleum floor, leaving puddles in his wake. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows in the otherwise quiet waiting room. "Help! I need help here!" His voice echoed off the mint-green walls. The puppy lay limp in his arms, its wet fur matted and cold. A petite woman in blue scrubs emerged from behind the reception desk, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes widened at the sight of them, but her movements remained steady and purposeful as she approached. "I'm Dr. Baines, Nora Baines." What happened? She reached for the puppy, her hands gentle but confident. Found him on the interstate. Bram explained, his breath still coming in quick bursts. He was trapped on a culvert ledge in the storm. Nearly went over getting to him. Nora quickly assessed the situation, her expression shifting from concern to focused determination. Exam room 2. Follow me. They hurried down a short hallway into a small room dominated by a stainless steel examination table. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled the air. Nora flipped on additional lights and grabbed a stack of towels from a nearby cabinet. Place him here, she directed, spreading a towel on the table. Carefully. Bram gently laid the puppy down. Under the bright lights, the poor creature looked even worse. Its golden fur was dirty and tangled, ribs clearly visible beneath the skin. The mysterious Y6 brand stood out starkly on its ear. Nora worked quickly, checking vital signs while speaking in a calm, professional tone. Temperature's low. Breathing's shallow but steady. Her hands moved methodically over the puppy's body. She paused, frowning as she examined several small marks on the dog's neck and hindquarters. What is it? Bram asked, hovering nearby. These marks. She traced them gently with her finger. They're injection sites. Recent ones. This isn't consistent with a typical stray. She looked up at Bram, her eyes sharp with concern. And that brand, I've never seen anything like it. Before either could speak further, the clinic's front door chimed. Heavy footsteps approached, and 2 uniformed animal control officers appeared in the doorway. The taller one, whose nameplate read Officer Martinez, stepped forward. We received a call about a recovered stray, he stated flatly. We'll need to take custody of the animal. County protocols. Bram moved instinctively between them and the examination table. He's not going anywhere. He needs medical care. Sir, this is county property until claimed. We have procedures. He's not property. Bram cut in, his voice firm. He's injured and needs help. I'll pay for his care, whatever it costs. Officer Martinez's expression hardened. That's not how this works. We have facilities. Actually, Nora interrupted, stepping forward with a clipboard. Under state law, if someone assumes financial responsibility and signs a liability waiver, they can request a 48-hour medical hold for evaluation of an found animal. She held out a pen to Bram. Would you like to sign? Bram took the pen without hesitation. Where do I sign? The officers exchanged looks as Bram quickly filled out the form. Officer Martinez pulled out his phone, stepping into the hallway to make a call. His partner remained in the doorway, arms crossed. Nora began setting up an IV line while Bram completed the paperwork. We'll need to start fluids, check for internal injuries. Run some basic blood work. She glanced at him. It won't be cheap. Don't care about the cost. Bram replied, signing the final page with a flourish. Do whatever he needs. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Nora worked efficiently, drawing blood samples, taking X-rays, and administering medications. Bram stayed close, helping when needed, watching as the puppy slowly began to show signs of improvement under her care. As dawn approached, Bram's phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor at the towing company. Office, 8 a.m. contract review. Moments later, another message. Drop this dog business. Not worth the hassle. Bram looked at the puppy, now sleeping more peacefully under a warming blanket, then at Nora, who was carefully documenting every injection scar and measurement of the brand in the medical record. His jaw set with determination. The contract could wait. I need to check something, Nora said, moving to a computer terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed various databases. The initial scan showed a microchip, but something's not adding up. The registration details aren't matching standard protocols. She turned the screen so Bram could see. See these numbers? They don't follow any known manufacturer's sequence, and the registration information is Strange. It's like it's been deliberately obscured. Bram leaned closer, studying the screen. What does that mean? It means someone went to a lot of trouble to make this puppy difficult to trace. Nora's expression was troubled as she looked back at their patient. Combined with those injection sites and that brand, something very wrong is going on here. They shared a long look, both understanding the implications. Whatever they'd stumbled into, it was bigger than a simple rescue. We need to document everything, Nora said finally, reaching for her camera. Every mark, every scar, every detail of that brand. And we need to monitor him through the night. I don't like how his blood work looks. I'll stay, Bram said without hesitation. His towing contract, his job security, the meeting waiting for him at 8 a.m., none of it mattered as much as making sure this puppy survived. Nora nodded, understanding in her eyes. She began taking detailed photographs of the Y6 brand, measuring its dimensions and noting every detail in the medical record. They worked together through the remaining hours of darkness, watching vital signs, administering medications, and building a careful record of every suspicious finding. The puppy slept on, unaware of the storm he'd sparked, both the one that had led to his rescue and the one now brewing around him. As morning light began to creep through the clinic's windows, Bram pulled up a chair beside the examination table, his hand resting gently on the puppy's now warm fur. He'd crossed a line by refusing to hand over the dog, choosing to protect this vulnerable creature over his own interests. Looking at the sleeping puppy, seeing the obvious signs of whatever dark purpose had marked him with that brand, Bram knew he'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when the clinic's front door chimed. Through the glass windows, Bram spotted two men in expensive suits striding purposefully towards the entrance. The first was tall and immaculately groomed, wearing what looked like $1,000 suit. Behind him followed a shorter man clutching a leather briefcase. Nora looked up from her paperwork at the front desk, her expression turning guarded as the men entered. The taller man's polished appearance seemed out of place in the modest small-town clinic. "I'm Silas Dree, owner of Dree Kennels," the tall man announced, his voice carrying an edge of authority despite his pleasant tone. "I understand you're holding one of my animals." Bram stood up straighter, positioning himself between the men and the doorway leading to where the puppy rested. "The pup I found abandoned on the highway?" "Yes, precisely." Silas smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Unfortunate escape during transport. Mr. Harrison here," he gestured to the man with the briefcase, "is my attorney. We have all the necessary documentation to reclaim our property." Nora stepped forward, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "I'll need to see that paperwork, Mr. Dree. As the treating veterinarian, I have to ensure everything's in order." The attorney opened his briefcase, producing a stack of documents. "Everything's here. Breeding records, ownership certificates, transportation permits." Nora accepted the papers, her eyes scanning them methodically. Bram watched as her brow furrowed slightly. "These ownership records," she said carefully, "they don't match our scan of the microchip." "A simple clerical error, I'm sure," Silas replied smoothly. "We handle hundreds of animals." "And this brand, Y6?" Nora continued, her voice steady but pointed. "Can you explain your marking system?" Something flickered in Silas's eyes, just for a moment, before his pleasant expression returned. "Standard industry practice for tracking bloodlines. Nothing unusual. I'd like to verify these numbers against our database," Nora said, moving to her computer. "Won't take but a minute." While she worked, Silas turned his attention to Bram. "I appreciate your good intentions in picking up our dog, Mr. Whitaker." Bram Whitaker. "Mr. Whitaker. However, you're currently in possession of valuable breeding stock. Your continued detention of our property could be construed as theft." "Theft." Bram's voice was quiet but firm. "The pup was half dead on a highway culvert in the middle of a storm. As I said, an unfortunate escape. These things happen." Silas straightened his already perfect tie. We're prepared to be reasonable. No charges pressed. Full reimbursement of your veterinary expenses. Mr. Audrey, Nora called from her computer. I'm finding some discrepancies in these records. She pulled up several files on her screen. Your paperwork shows this dog as part of what you're calling Y6 litter, but the chip registration links to a completely different set of numbers. And when I cross-reference... Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up more records. There's a pattern here. Y1 through Y8 litters, all with similar inconsistencies in their documentation. Our internal coding system is proprietary, the attorney interjected. We're not required to... Actually, Nora cut in, under state law, all breeding facilities must maintain transparent records for health and safety monitoring. These numbers don't add up, Mr. Dree. The reimbursements claimed for these litters far exceed the documented costs. Silas's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. I don't appreciate accusations from a small-town vet tech. Veterinarian, Nora corrected firmly. And these aren't accusations. They're documented inconsistencies that require investigation. Listen, Bram said, his voice level but resolute. This puppy needs medical care. He's staying here until he's properly treated. Silas turned to face him fully, all pretense of friendliness gone. You don't want to make an enemy of me, mister. Whitaker, I have contracts with every county in the region. One phone call, and your towing business becomes very complicated. As if on cue, Bram's phone buzzed in his pocket. His employer's number flashed on the screen. That might be your boss now, Silas said softly. I suggest you answer it, and then make the smart choice about returning our property. Bram let the phone ring. The pup stays until he's healthy. You should listen to him, Bram, Nora said, still studying her screen. We need to keep this evidence clean. Although, she glanced up with a slight smile. For the medical file, we do need some way to identify him. Bram looked at the puppy, who had lifted his head at the sound of the voices. Despite everything he'd been through, there was a spark of fight in those eyes. Rocky, Bram said quietly, like the fighter who wouldn't stay down. Nora made a note in the file, then turned back to Silas. Mr. Dree, given the discrepancies in these records, I'm obligated to report this to the State Veterinary Board for review. Until this is resolved, the puppy remains under medical observation. Silas's face hardened. You're making a serious mistake. Both of you. He turned to his lawyer. We're done here, for now. As they walked out, Silas paused at the door. Remember what I said, Mr. Whitaker. This isn't over. After they left, Bram's phone buzzed again. Same number. Your boss isn't going to be happy, Nora said, watching him ignore the call again. Probably not. Bram moved to check on Rocky, who wagged his tail weakly. But some things matter more than keeping people happy. Nora nodded, turning back to her computer. Help me with something. We need to map out these dates and numbers, all the reimbursements, costs, everything. There's a pattern here, and we need to find it. For the next hour, they worked together, creating a timeline of transactions, noting every inconsistency. The more they dug, the clearer it became. Something systematic was happening at Dree Kennels, something that went far beyond one branded puppy on a rainy night. Look at these numbers, Nora said, pointing to her screen. The reimbursements they're claiming for these Y-series litters, they're 3 times the documented costs. And the dates, there's no way they could have had this many litters in this time frame. Not legally. What does that mean? It means, Nora said grimly, that somewhere out there are a lot more puppies with brands like Rocky's, and someone's making a lot of money off them. Rocky whimpered softly from his bed, and Bram went to comfort him. As he scratched behind the pup's ears, his phone buzzed yet again. This time, it was a text message. Return the dog immediately or clean out your locker. Final warning. Bram showed the message to Nora, who had walked over to check Rocky's vitals. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. Bram looked at Rocky, then at all their work documenting the evidence of whatever scheme they'd stumbled into. The answer was simple. "My job is helping those who need it," he said. "Right now, that's exactly what I'm doing." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Dr. Keating's small office as he carefully closed the door behind them. His weathered face looked more lined than usual, the weight of what they were about to discuss evident in his furrowed brow. Bram and Nora sat in the 2 chairs facing his desk, while the veterinarian settled into his worn leather chair with deliberate slowness. "What you're telling me about this branded puppy, Doctor?" Keating began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Matches something troubling that came through here last week." He pulled open a drawer and withdrew a manila folder. "County brought in a stray for routine euthanasia. Young dog, perfectly healthy except for some unusual injection marks. I kept the body in our cold storage." Nora leaned forward, her eyes widening. "You didn't dispose of it?" "Something felt wrong, Doctor," Keating said quietly. 25 years running this clinic, you develop instincts. This dog shouldn't have been put down." He spread several photos across his desk. "Look familiar?" Bram's throat tightened as he saw the distinctive Y brand partially visible through fur in one of the images. Same marking system. "I'm willing to perform a proper necropsy." "Doctor," Keating said, "document everything. But you both need to understand, this could cost me my license if Dree's people find out." "We understand the risk," Nora assured him, "and we're grateful." A soft knock at the door made them all jump. Dr. Keating called out, "Come in." A tall, silver-haired woman entered, her bearing somehow both elegant and formidable. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "I'm Verity Carraway." She extended her hand to Doctor Keating. "Your receptionist said I might find you here." "Judge Carraway." Dr. Keating said, standing quickly. "This is unexpected." "Former judge." She corrected with a small smile. "I retired last year, but I couldn't help overhearing about a branded dog as I was waiting outside." Her piercing gaze swept over Bram and Nora. 3 years ago, my champion Irish setter disappeared from my property. He was picked up by county control, but when I went to retrieve him, they claimed he'd never been processed. I later saw a photo of him with that same Y brand." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Bram studied Judge Carraway's face, seeing the old pain there, but also something steely and determined. "We need to be smart about this," she continued, pulling up another chair. "I've spent years gathering fragments of evidence, but nothing concrete enough for legal action. Now, with what you've found—" She gestured to the photos on the desk. Over the next hour, they pieced together what they knew. Dr. Keating's necropsy would provide crucial medical evidence. Nora's access to clinic records could help establish patterns. Judge Carraway's legal expertise would ensure their documentation would hold up in court. "There's more," Nora said, pulling out her tablet. "I've traced shipment records to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's listed under one of Dree's shell companies." Bram spread out a local map on the desk. "I know that area. Used to tow for some of the businesses there. Lots of blind spots in the security coverage." His finger traced potential approach routes. Judge Carraway nodded approvingly. "We need irrefutable proof of what's happening inside that facility. Video evidence, properly documented chain of custody, multiple witnesses. I can handle the medical records and documentation," Nora offered. "Cross-reference everything with what Dr. Keating finds in the necropsy. I'll need at least 48 hours for a thorough examination." Dr. Keating said, "Every detail needs to be bulletproof." "I'll advise on evidence handling protocols," Judge Carraway added. "One procedural mistake could invalidate everything." Bram studied the warehouse layout. "I'll scout the entire perimeter, Map out entry and exit points, camera positions, guard rotations. We need multiple escape routes if something goes wrong. The goal is documentation only, Judge Carraway emphasized. No confrontations, no heroics. We gather evidence and get out clean. They spent another hour refining the plan. Dr. Keating would begin the necropsy the next morning, with Nora assisting and documenting. Judge Carraway would prepare the necessary legal frameworks to protect their evidence. Bram would start his surveillance of the warehouse that night. Friday night, Bram suggested. Activity's usually lowest then, based on what I've seen in that area. 3 days to prepare, Nora calculated. That works with the necropsy timeline. Judge Carraway pulled out her phone and created a secure group chat. We use this only for essential communications. Nothing explicit, nothing that could raise flags. As they prepared to leave, Doctor, Keating held up his hand. One more thing. He went to his safe and removed a small digital camera. High resolution, excellent in low light. I use it for detailed surgical documentation. It's perfect for what we need. They left separately, at carefully spaced intervals. Bram was last, watching through the window as Judge Carraway's elegant sedan turned one way and Nora's practical hybrid went another. Dr. Keating was already in his lab, preparing for tomorrow's grim but necessary task. The weight of what they were attempting settled over Bram as he walked to his truck. 4 people, each risking something significant, careers, reputations, personal safety, to expose a truth others had worked hard to hide. But seeing the quiet determination in their faces, hearing the conviction in their voices, he knew they had a real chance. That night, as Bram parked in the shadows across from the warehouse, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his firefighting days, the focused calm of having a solid team at his back. He pulled out his notebook and began sketching the building's layout, marking security cameras and guard positions. Every detail could matter. The next morning, Doctor Keating and Nora began their careful examination of the euthanized dog. Every incision, every observation was photographed and documented. Judge Carraway reviewed their protocols, ensuring every step would withstand legal scrutiny. They met again that evening in Dr. Keating's office, sharing their findings. The necropsy revealed a pattern of regular injections consistent with medical testing. Nora's record search uncovered more disappeared dogs with similar profiles. Bram's surveillance photos showed regular nighttime deliveries that matched no official manifests. Friday at 11 o'clock, Judge Carraway confirmed, her voice steady. We'll need 4 copies of everything. Video, photos, documents. I have secure locations ready for each set. They reviewed their roles one final time. Nora would handle all documentation and records. Dr. Keating's medical evidence would provide the scientific backbone. Judge Carraway would ensure every piece of evidence met legal standards. Bram would guide them safely in and out of the facility. As they prepared to leave, Judge Carraway touched each of their arms in turn. What we're doing, it matters, not just for the animals, but for every person who's had something precious taken away by people who thought they were above the law. Dr. Keating nodded solemnly. Whatever happens, we've chosen to act rather than look away. Nora squeezed Bram's hand briefly. 3 days to prepare. Let's make them count. They separated into the gathering darkness, each carrying their piece of the plan, bound together by shared purpose and the knowledge that sometimes justice requires ordinary people to take extraordinary risks. The night air carried an acrid smell that made Bram's heart skip. As he and Nora pulled up to the warehouse in his tow truck, orange flames already licked the night sky. The quiet documentation mission they'd planned had turned into something far more urgent. "Oh, God!" Nora breathed, her face illuminated by the growing inferno. "The dogs! They're still inside!" The desperate barking confirmed her worst fears. Dozens of panicked yelps and howls echoed from within the burning building. Bram's firefighting instincts kicked in as he assessed the situation. Black smoke billowed from under the eaves, and flames were visible through the high windows. "Call 911!" he shouted to Nora as he sprinted toward the nearest side door. The handle wouldn't budge, locked. The main entrance was already consumed by fire. Time was running out. Nora fumbled with her phone, fingers shaking as she dialed. "This is an emergency. There's a fire at the Dree Kennels warehouse on Industrial Drive. There are animals trapped inside." While she reported their location, she also opened her streaming app and started a live broadcast to Judge Carraway. They needed evidence, even in this chaos. Maybe especially in this chaos. Bram's mind raced through his old training. The metal door was solid, but the frame looked weathered. He grabbed a steel pipe from his truck and wedged it near the hinges. "Stand back," he called to Nora. With all his strength, he leveraged the pipe. The frame groaned, then gave way with a crack. Smoke immediately poured out the opening. Bram dropped low, where the air was clearer. "Stay here and keep filming," he told Nora. "I'm going in. Be careful," she called after him, holding her phone steady despite her trembling hands. Inside, the heat was intense. Bram's eyes stung as he crawled forward, following the sounds of frightened animals. The warehouse was a maze of metal crates stacked almost to the ceiling. In the flickering light of the flames, he could see dogs pressing against their cage doors, desperately trying to escape. Then he heard it, an ominous hissing sound that made his blood run cold. A propane tank, probably used for heating, was venting gas into the inferno. If it exploded, the whole building would go up like a bomb. "Nora!" he shouted back toward the door. "There's a propane tank. Get everyone back." Through the smoke, he spotted the tank's outline. Years of training took over as he fought his way toward it. The valve was hot to the touch, but he managed to grip it with his jacket sleeve, forcing it shut. One disaster averted, but they weren't safe yet. The closest cages held trembling puppies, their ears marked with familiar brands. Even in the chaos, Bram could make out the Y stamps, proof of what they'd suspected all along. But proof wouldn't matter if these animals died here. Nora had ignored his warning to stay back. She appeared through the smoke, phone held high, documenting everything. "The fire department's coming, but they're still minutes away." Together, they began opening cages. Some dogs bolted for the exit immediately, while others needed coaxing. Bram's lungs burned as he worked his way down the rows, making sure no cage was missed. "Look," Nora coughed, zooming her camera on a cage label. "These are from the same litter as our rescue, Y6. The heat was becoming unbearable. Sections of the roof were starting to cave in, sending showers of sparks around them. Bram grabbed the last whimpering puppy from its cage and turned to Nora. "We've got to get out, now!" They staggered toward the exit, smoke stinging their eyes and filling their lungs. The roar of the fire was deafening. Just as they reached the door, a support beam crashed down behind them, missing them by inches. They emerged into the cool night air, coughing and gasping. Dogs scattered across the parking lot, many still wearing their identifying tags and brands. In the distance, sirens wailed. Nora was still filming, her hands blackened with soot, but steady as she captured the scene. "Judge Carraway, are you getting this?" She wheezed into her phone. "Every second," came the judge's voice through the speaker. "The footage is streaming directly to my secure server. They can't bury this now." Bram sank to his knees, lungs heaving as he tried to clear the smoke from them. The puppy in his arms squirmed and licked his sooty face. Around them, other rescued dogs huddled in groups or ran in confused circles, their brands clearly visible in the light of the flames. Fire trucks began arriving, their red lights painting the scene in surreal flashes. EMTs rushed to check on Bram and Nora, wrapping them in blankets and fitting oxygen masks over their faces. Through it all, Nora kept filming. The warehouse was fully engulfed now, but the evidence they needed had escaped with the dogs themselves. Living, breathing proof of the illegal operation, each one marked with damning brands. A police officer approached them, notebook in hand. "I need to know exactly what happened here." Bram and Nora exchanged looks. This wasn't how they'd planned to expose the truth, but maybe this was better. There would be no hiding a fire of this size, no way to sweep it under the rug. The media would come, and questions would be asked about why so many branded dogs were locked in a warehouse at night. As if on cue, the first news van pulled into the lot, its satellite dish extending skyward. Nora's phone buzzed with a text from Judge Carraway. "Don't say anything yet. I'm on my way with a lawyer." Bram reached over and squeezed Nora's hand. They were both shaking, covered in soot, and probably in for the fight of their lives. But for the first time since finding that first puppy on the culvert, he felt like the truth might actually come to light. The rescued dogs gathered around them, drawn perhaps to the people who had saved them. Their brands stood out starkly against their fur, Y1 through Y8, just as they'd suspected. Each one was evidence of the systematic abuse they'd been trying to prove. Emergency workers continued to arrive, documenting the scene and treating the animals. The warehouse burned like a beacon in the night, but its secrets had already escaped. In Nora's phone, safely uploaded to Judge Carraway's server, was the footage that would make it impossible to ignore what had been happening here. Bram took another deep breath from his oxygen mask, watching the flames consume the building. Someone had tried to destroy the evidence, that much was clear. But in doing so, they'd created an even bigger story, one that would be impossible to hide. A small whimper drew his attention down to the puppy still cradled in his arms. Its ear bore the same Y6 brand as their first rescue, the one that had started all of this. These weren't just pieces of evidence anymore, they were survivors, each one a testament to the cruelty they'd endured and the truth that needed to be told. The night air filled with the sounds of emergency vehicles, running water, and the occasional bark of a rescued dog. But underneath it all was something else, the feeling that everything was about to change. The warehouse might be burning, but the truth had finally broken free. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Judge Carraway's home office as Bram, Nora, and Doctor. Keating gathered around her mahogany desk. Papers and files lay scattered across its surface, telling a disturbing story through numbers and dates that made Bram's stomach turn. "Look at this pattern," Nora said, pointing to a spreadsheet she'd compiled. Her finger traced down a column of dates and numbers. Every time a litter marked Y6 appears in the records, there's a corresponding spike in reported euthanasias within 2 weeks. But that's not all. Dr. Keating adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. The insurance claims match up perfectly. For each batch of puppies marked as euthanized, Dree's operation files claims for medical costs and disposal fees. Judge Carraway nodded grimly, her silver hair catching the morning light. The Y-series isn't just random branding, it's a tracking system for their scheme. Y1 through Y8, each represents a different litter targeted for false claims. Bram's hands clenched into fists. So they're not just abusing these animals. They're making money off their deaths twice over, once from the county contract and again from the insurance. 3 times. Nora corrected, her voice tight with anger. Don't forget the off-book sales. Some of these puppies aren't being euthanized at all. They're being sold through underground channels. Judge Carraway pulled out a thick manila envelope. I took our preliminary findings to the State Attorney General's office yesterday. They're interested, but... She sighed heavily. They need more. Current, irrefutable proof. Documentation of ongoing transactions, not just historical patterns. We can get that, Bram said firmly. We just need to... A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Judge Carraway's housekeeper appeared, looking concerned. Ma'am, Sheriff Mott is here. He says it's urgent. The room fell silent. Through the window, they could see the sheriff's cruiser in the driveway, its official presence somehow menacing in the morning sunshine. Stay here, Carraway instructed, rising from her desk. And stay quiet. They listened as she greeted the sheriff in her foyer, their voices carrying faintly through the old house's walls. What they heard next made the blood drain from Bram's face. Verity, we go back 30 years, Sheriff Mott was saying, his tone inappropriately familiar. So I'm here as a friend. Whatever you think you're digging into with Dree's operation, drop it. Some arrangements are better left alone. Is that a threat, Alton? A friendly warning. I've got pension investments tied up in that operation. Lot of people do. You start pulling threads, whole damn sweater comes apart. The revelation hit Bram like a physical blow. Sheriff Mott wasn't just looking the other way, he was actively involved. A silent partner. That explained the lightning-fast cover-ups, the pressure on witnesses, the convenient disappearance of evidence. When Carraway returned to her office, her face was set in stone. "Well," she said quietly, "now we know why nothing ever sticks. The rot goes straight to the top of county law enforcement. This changes everything." "Doctor," Keating murmured, "we're not just fighting Dree anymore. We're up against the entire county machine." Nora stood up, determination blazing in her eyes. "No, this gives us an advantage. Now we know why our previous attempts failed. We can plan accordingly." They spent the next hour reorganizing their approach. Dr. Keating would focus on compiling bulletproof medical evidence, tissue samples, blood work, documentation of abuse that couldn't be explained away. He had connections with state veterinary boards that could provide independent verification. Judge Carraway would work on securing a direct line to the Attorney General's office, bypassing local law enforcement entirely. Her reputation and decades on the bench gave her the credibility to make those connections stick. "What we need," Bram said, pacing the room, "is to catch them in the act. Not just evidence after the fact, but live documentation of the transactions and the dogs in transit." "A sting operation?" Nora asked. "Exactly. But controlled, precise. We track the next scheduled transfer of dogs, document everything from start to finish. Video, photos, GPS coordinates, everything the AG's office would need to move forward." Judge Carraway nodded slowly. "If we can prove current criminal activity, they'll have to act. Especially with a sitting sheriff involved. That kicks it up to state jurisdiction automatically. I can help with the timing, Doctor," Keating offered. "The shelter has to file transfer notices with my office for health certificates. I'll know when the next batch is moving." They worked methodically through the logistics. Nora would handle the documentation, using her medical knowledge to identify and catalogue the abuse markers. Dr. Keating would prepare detailed reports connecting specific injuries to systemic mistreatment. Judge Carraway would establish the legal framework to protect their evidence and ensure it reached the right authorities. Bram would coordinate the actual surveillance, drawing on his experience as a tow truck driver to track vehicle movements without drawing attention. His job gave him the perfect cover for being on any road at any time. As they finalized their plans, Bram couldn't help but stare at the Y6 brand on the photograph in front of him. Such a simple mark, but it represented something so much darker, a calculated system of abuse and fraud that reached into the highest levels of local government. "One thing's certain," Judge Carraway said, gathering up their documents. "We only get one shot at this. If we move and miss, they'll burn everything to the ground, figuratively or literally." "Then we don't miss," Nora said firmly. "We get everything. The transactions, the abuse, the money trail, the whole operation. No loose ends they can explain away." Dr. Keating cleared his throat. "The next transfer is scheduled for Friday. 3 days from now. According to the paperwork, it's supposed to be a routine movement of strays to a partner shelter upstate. But we know better," Bram said grimly. "Those dogs are either going to disappear into their underground sales network or show up as insurance claims. Either way, we'll be there to document every moment." They left Judge Carraway's house separately, taking different routes home to avoid attention. The weight of what they'd discovered, and what they planned to do about it, sat heavy on their shoulders. But there was also a sense of clarity. They finally understood the full scope of what they were fighting, and that understanding gave them power. Bram drove home slowly, his mind working through every detail of their planned sting. The Y6 brand on that first puppy he'd rescued from the storm drain had seemed like a simple mystery then. Now he knew it was just one thread in a tapestry of corruption that had suffocated their county for years. But threads, when pulled the right way, could unravel even the tightest weave. And on Friday, they would start pulling. The early morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Bram pulled his tow truck into Mike's auto yard. The familiar scent of oil and rusty metal filled the air as he stepped out, gravel crunching under his boots. He'd chosen this particular yard carefully. Mike had connections throughout the county's vehicle networks, including animal control. "Hey, Mike," Bram called out, spotting the yard owner bent over a beat-up Chevy. "Got a minute?" Mike straightened up, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. "Bram, haven't seen you around lately. What brings you by?" Bram had rehearsed this conversation dozens of times. "Looking to expand my side business. Heard you might know someone who deals in specialty animals, show dogs, that kind of thing." Mike's expression shifted subtly. "Might know somebody. What exactly are you in the market for?" "Pure breeds. German shepherds mainly. Got a client willing to pay premium, no questions asked." Bram kept his voice casual, maintaining eye contact. "Let me make a call," Mike said after a moment's consideration. "Guy I know handles that sort of thing. Real professional operation." While Mike stepped away to make the call, Bram sent a quick text to Nora. "Contact made. Stand by." The plan was already in motion. Dr. Keating had his mobile clinic ready, parked 15 minutes from the quarry they'd identified through satellite imagery. Judge Carraway was maintaining a secure digital upload point for all their evidence, and Nora was their eyes, positioned strategically with long-range recording equipment. Mike returned, handing Bram a piece of paper with a number scrawled on it. "Tell them Mike vouched. They're expecting your call." "Thanks, Mike. I owe you one." Bram pocketed the paper, his heart racing despite his calm exterior. Back in his truck, Bram made the call. A gruff voice answered on the third ring. They arranged a meeting at a truck stop just outside county lines. Simple, direct, professional, just like any other illegal transaction. "In position," Nora texted. "Animal control van just left the shelter, heading north on County Road 23. Bram followed at a distance, keeping the white van in sight while staying far enough back to avoid suspicion. The van turned off the main road onto a series of increasingly remote routes. Dense forest gave way to stark quarry walls. Through his earpiece, he could hear Nora's whispered commentary as she documented everything from her vantage point. She'd positioned herself on a ridge overlooking the quarry, her camera equipped with a powerful zoom lens. "2 more vehicles arriving," she murmured. "Black SUV, tinted windows, and a cargo truck. Looks like it's refrigerated." Bram parked where instructed, at the quarry's main entrance. A man in work boots and a safety vest approached, clipboard in hand. Everything looked legitimate on the surface, just another day at an active quarry site. "You Mike's friend?" the man asked, checking something off his clipboard. "That's right. Hear about the German shepherds." The man nodded. "Follow me. We're doing temperament assessments today. You can see the stock in action." Bram's hidden camera captured everything as they walked deeper into the quarry. The setup was impressive in its efficiency. A series of temporary kennels arranged in rows, each tagged with codes similar to the Y6 brand they'd discovered. "Multiple handlers injecting something into the dogs." Nora's voice came through his earpiece. "Getting clear shots of everything. Dr. Keating needs to see this." The temperament trials were clearly designed to assess fighting potential. Bram watched, maintaining his interested buyer facade, as handlers forced dogs into confrontational situations, documenting their responses. The entire operation was methodical, professional, and utterly horrifying. "These two show promise," the handler said, indicating a pair of shepherds. "Premium stock. 10,000 each, cash only." Bram made a show of examining the dogs, buying time as Nora documented the entire transaction. Through his hidden camera, he captured the branded crates, the doping procedure, the exchange of money, everything they needed to prove the operation's existence. "Cargo trucks being loaded now," Nora reported. "Getting all plate numbers and markings? Full evidence chain in progress." For 3 hours, Bram maintained his cover, expressing interest, asking relevant questions, building trust. He watched as dogs were processed through the system. Intake, assessment, assignment to different channels, some for fighting, others for breeding. Many simply disappeared into the disposal category. "Dr. Keating, are you getting all this?" Nora whispered through their shared channel. "Every second." The veterinarian confirmed. "The injection sites, the physical trauma patterns, it's all consistent with organized abuse. This will hold up in court." As the sun began to set, Bram made his exit, promising to return with cash for the two shepherds. He drove away slowly, professionally, fighting the urge to speed away from the horror he'd witnessed. "All evidence uploaded to secure servers." Judge Carraway's voice came through once he was safely away. "Multiple backups in place. They can't bury this one." 2 miles from the quarry, Bram pulled over and let out a shaky breath. Nora's car appeared a few minutes later, and she parked beside him. "We did it," she said, her face pale but determined. "We got everything. The intake process, the categorization system, the disposal methods. They can't deny this is happening." "The brands match," Bram confirmed. "Same system we saw with Y6. They're all connected. The shelter, animal control, the quarry operation. It's all one pipeline." Dr. Keating's voice crackled over their earpieces. "I've reviewed the preliminary footage. The medical evidence is overwhelming. These animals are being systematically abused and processed through an organized pipeline. No one can claim these are isolated incidents." For the first time since finding that first branded puppy in the storm drain, they had solid, undeniable proof. Every step of the operation had been documented, from initial intake to final disposition. The evidence was already secured on multiple servers, protected by Judge Carraway's legal expertise. "We should move," Nora said, checking her mirrors. "We don't want anyone from the quarry spotting us." Bram nodded, starting his engine. They had what they needed: current, continuous evidence of ongoing criminal activity. The next steps would require careful coordination with state authorities, but for now, they had accomplished their mission. The truth about the county's dark secret was finally documented, backed up, and ready to be revealed. They drove away separately, taking different routes home, their cameras and equipment carefully hidden. The footage they'd captured would take days to fully process, but they knew they had succeeded. The quarry's brutal efficiency, the coded system of brands, the network of participants, it was all preserved in high-definition detail, waiting to expose the truth about what happened to the county's lost dogs. The evening shadows lengthened across the quarry as Bram pulled his tow truck behind a stand of scrub pines. Their careful documentation of the illegal operation had seemed like a victory just hours ago. Now, watching headlights sweep the gravel road below, his instincts screamed that something was wrong. His phone buzzed. Nora's message flashed. "Movement at the north gate. 3 vehicles." Bram's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They weren't supposed to be here. The quarry was usually deserted on Sundays. He grabbed his flashlight and slipped out of the cab, staying low as he worked his way towards the overlook. The crunch of tires on gravel made him freeze. 2 black SUVs rolled past his position, their windows tinted dark. In the fading light, he caught glimpses of familiar faces behind the wheel. Men he'd seen at Dree's kennel, the ones who handled the special transfers. His radio crackled. "Bram, they're blocking the access road." Nora whispered. "I'm pulling back to—" Static cut through her words. "Nora?" He kept his voice low. "Come in." The radio stayed silent. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Before Bram could turn, something hard crashed into the back of his head. He stumbled, stars exploding across his vision. 2 pairs of hands grabbed his arms. "Should have minded your own business, Whitaker," a gravelly voice said. The first punch doubled him over. The second caught him in the ribs. Bram tried to fight back, but they had his arms pinned. The beating continued, methodical, professional. These weren't random thugs. They knew exactly how much damage to do without leaving permanent marks. "Consider this your warning," one man growled. "Walk away now, or next time we won't be so gentle." They let him drop to his knees. Through swollen eyes, Bram watched them disappear into the darkness. His whole body throbbed, but fear for Nora overshadowed the pain. He fumbled for his radio. "Nora, get out! Now!" Tires squealed in the distance. Then he heard it, the terrible sound of loose gravel giving way. Forcing himself up, Bram ran toward the sound. His bruised muscles screamed in protest, but he pushed through it. As he rounded the bend, his heart nearly stopped. Nora's car teetered at the quarry's edge, its rear wheels spinning uselessly as more gravel crumbled beneath them. The front bumper pointed skyward at a sickening angle. Through the windshield, he could see her white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. "Don't move!" he shouted. "Stay perfectly still." The car shifted another inch toward the void. 60 feet below, jagged rocks waited in the gathering darkness. Bram's mind raced. The tow truck was too far away. The car would go over before he could get back with a winch line. His eyes fell on his tool bag, thrown aside during the beating. The wheel chock. It was his only chance. He grabbed the heavy rubber wedge and approached the car's driver's side. "Nora, when I say now, ease off the brake just a fraction. We've got one shot at this." Her voice shook. "Bram, I can't. Trust me, please." She gave a tiny nod. Bram positioned himself, ignoring the screaming pain in his ribs. "Now!" As the car shifted, he lunged forward, jamming the wheel chock under the tire. For one terrifying moment, the weight of the vehicle threatened to pull him over too. Then the wheel caught, and the backward slide stopped. "Thank God," Nora breathed. "Don't move yet," Bram warned. He was already calculating how to get her out safely when headlights swept across them. Sheriff Mott's cruiser pulled up, followed by Silas Dree's Mercedes. Bram's heart sank as he saw who Silas carried. Y6, the rescued puppy they'd been protecting. Well, well, Silas drawled, stepping out. "Caught in the act of trespassing. And look what we found at your apartment, Mr. Whitaker. My missing property." Sheriff Mott approached, handcuffs glinting. "Bram Whitaker, you're under arrest for burglary, criminal trespass, and interference with police operations." "What? That's ridiculous." Bram started to protest, but Mott was already reading him his rights. "We have witnesses who saw you break into Mr. Dree's office earlier today," Mott continued, "along with evidence of your ongoing harassment and interference with legitimate business operations." Nora, finally extracted from her car, tried to intervene. "This is absurd." "You can't. Ma'am, unless you want to join him in custody, I suggest you stay quiet," Mott warned. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Silas held up a document. "Oh, and since this animal was obtained illegally and has shown aggressive tendencies, it's been properly scheduled for euthanasia, first thing tomorrow morning." Bram lunged forward, but Mott's grip was iron. "You can't do this! That dog's evidence—" "Evidence of what?" Silas smiled coldly. "Your illegal activities? Don't worry, we'll make sure everything's handled properly. With all the necessary paperwork, of course." They forced Bram into the back of the cruiser. Through the window, he watched helplessly as Nora was warned away by one of Silas's men. Six whimpered in Silas's arms, and Bram's chest tightened with despair and fury. The drive to the county jail passed in a blur of pain and anger. They processed him efficiently. Fingerprints, mugshot, paperwork. The cell door clanged shut with crushing finality. Sitting on the thin mattress, Bram gingerly touched his swollen face. Everything they'd worked for was unraveling. Six would be dead by morning. Nora had nearly died, and he was locked up, powerless to stop any of it. Or was he? His mind turned to Carraway. The retired judge had connections they'd barely tapped. Their carefully gathered evidence, backup drives, and documentation were all safely stored in locations Silas couldn't touch. If he could get word to her— A guard walked past, and Bram called out, "I get one phone call, right?" Minutes later, he stood at the phone, dialing Carraway's number with shaking fingers. When her voice answered, he spoke quickly. "They got me. But the playbook's in place. Everything we documented, all the evidence, it's in your hands now. Trust Nora to run point. She knows what to do." "Bram, are you—" "No time. Dawn tomorrow. That's their deadline. You have to move fast." He hung up, hoping it was enough. As they led him back to his cell, Bram's thoughts were with Y6 and Nora. He'd started this fight by refusing to look away when others did. Now, bruised and caged, he had to trust others to finish it. The cell door closed again. In the darkness, Bram touched his aching ribs and prayed they'd be fast enough to save Y6. Dawn was coming, and with it, either salvation or heartbreak. Everything hinged on Carraway and Nora now. He lay back on the thin mattress, every breath a reminder of the beating he'd taken. The night stretched ahead, full of shadows and worry. But underneath the pain and fear, a fierce determination burned. They might have him locked up, but the evidence was safe. The truth would come out. Bram closed his eyes, trying to find strength for whatever tomorrow would bring. Somewhere in the darkness, a clock ticked steadily toward dawn. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the county jail as Bram pressed the cold phone receiver to his ear, his bruised fingers trembling slightly. Through the scratched plexiglass, Verity Carraway sat straight-backed in her chair, legal pad ready, her silver hair gleaming under the harsh lighting. The main breaker panel's on the east wall of the quarry office, Bram said quietly, his voice rough from exhaustion. It controls everything. The mag locks, security lights, cameras. They run it all through there to save on wiring. Carraway's pen moved swiftly across the yellow paper. Give me the exact layout. Every detail matters now. 3 access roads leading in. Bram continued, closing his eyes to visualize the quarry's layout. Main entrance has a gate with a keypad. Code changes weekly. But there's a service road that loops behind the crushing plant. No camera coverage there. That's your blind spot. He watched Carraway methodically document every word. The retired judge's presence steadied him, gave him hope that this nightmare could still end right. The kennels are in the old equipment shed, he went on. 2 rows of chain link runs, probably 30 total. Each has an electronic mag lock that ties back to that breaker panel. Kill the power. He let the implication hang. And the locks fail open. Carraway finished, nodding. Safety protocol. Exactly. There's more. The whole place is plumbed with industrial sprinklers. Fire code requirement for the quarry operation. Same breaker panel controls the pump. Bram leaned forward, warming to the tactical possibilities. Hit that, and you'll create instant chaos. Dogs'll be spooked, handlers scrambling. Perfect conditions for documenting their real practices, Carraway said. Her pen paused. But Bram, this is extremely high risk. If anything goes wrong. I know. He pressed his palm against the glass. But they've got Y6 scheduled for dawn. We're out of options. While Bram laid out the technical details to Carraway, across town Nora was hunched over her laptop in Dr. Keating's back office. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she compiled their gathered evidence. Shaky cell phone footage from the warehouse fire, GPS-tagged photos of branded puppies, time-stamped video from their quarry surveillance. Dr. Keating stood behind her chair, peering at the screen. Don't forget to include my toxicology reports, he reminded her. The ketamine levels in those deceased animals tell their own story. Got it. Nora pulled up his PDF files, adding them to the growing digital package. And here's your documented pattern of intake versus reported euthanasia numbers. The spikes line up perfectly with their Y-series litters. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carraway. Bram's given me the layout. How soon can you have everything ready? Nora's thumbs flew. 30 minutes. Final compression now. We'll send secure link. She turned back to the screen, double-checking every file name, every timestamp. This had to be bulletproof. Lives depended on it, both human and canine. In her holding cell, Carraway was already on the phone with the Attorney General's office, her voice carrying the weight of her years on the bench. I'm sending you documented evidence of systematic animal abuse, falsified records, and misappropriation of county funds. Yes, I understand it's after hours. This cannot wait until morning. The digital package arrived in the AG's secure server just as Bram's court-appointed attorney, Ellen Martinez, strode into the jail's booking area, her heels clicking purposefully on the concrete floor. I've secured his release pending the hearing. she announced to the desk sergeant, who barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. "The paperwork's all here." 20 minutes later, Bram walked out into the cool night air, his personal belongings in a plastic bag. His phone was already buzzing with texts from Nora. "Got your release notice. Meet me at Keating's in 30. We need to plan." The veterinary clinic was dark when Bram pulled up, but he could see lights on in the back office. He slipped in through the side door, finding Nora and Doctor. Keating bent over blueprints of the quarry facility spread across the exam table. "How are you holding up?" Nora asked, her eyes taking in his bruised face. "I'm fine," Bram said, waving off her concern. "What's our timeline?" "Dawn's at 6:17. "Doctor," Keating said, checking his phone. "They typically start their morning procedures at 5:45. That gives us less than 4 hours," Bram said, studying the blueprints. "We'll need to be in position well before first light." Nora pulled up the weather report on her tablet. "Cloud cover should work in our favor." "New moon, too." They spent the next hour meticulously planning each step. Nora would approach from the service road, using the blind spot Bram had identified. Her role was to document everything. Every handler, every vehicle, every action. Her phone was fully charged, with a backup battery pack ready. "I've got 3 phones," she said, laying them out. Each one set to stream directly to different secure clouds. They can't stop all the feeds. Bram would come in from the main entrance. "I still have my buyer's credentials from the sting," he said. "They might have flagged them, but it should get me through the gate. I'll head straight for the breaker panel." "The timing has to be perfect, Doctor," Keating reminded them. "Too early, and they'll have time to regroup." Too late. He didn't need to finish the thought. They all knew what was at stake. "Caraway's got the AG's rapid response team on standby," Nora said. "The moment we start streaming proof of active abuse, they'll move in." Bram checked his own phone, making sure the encrypted messaging app was working. "We'll need a signal to coordinate. When I'm in position at the breaker, I'll send a single word. Now." "Then I start recording," Nora said. "Give me 30 seconds to get the initial establishing shots, then kill the power." "The sprinklers will trigger almost immediately," Bram added. "That's when all hell breaks loose. Keep filming no matter what happens." Dr. Keating cleared his throat. "I'll be parked half a mile down the main road with my mobile clinic set up. Any animals that need immediate care." They spent another hour running through contingencies. What if the gate code had changed? What if security had been increased? What if the AG's team was delayed? "We can't afford to wait for backup," Bram said firmly. "The moment that sun rises, Y6 is gone. Everything we've done, everything we've risked, will have been for nothing." Nora reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We won't let that happen." They drove separately to their staging points, maintaining radio silence. Bram's truck was hidden behind an abandoned gas station a mile from the quarry. Nora's car was tucked into a grove of trees near the service road. Both had their phones charged, apps ready, hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. The eastern sky was still pitch black, but hints of grey were beginning to soften the horizon. In less than an hour, the quarry would start coming to life. Workers would arrive, machines would power up, and somewhere in those kennels, a small puppy with a Y6 brand waited unknowingly for either death or salvation. Bram checked his watch. 4:45 a.m., time to move. He sent a final text to Nora. "Remember, no matter what happens, keep streaming. The world needs to see this." Her reply came immediately. "Be careful. See you on the other side." He started his truck, the familiar rumble of the engine steadying his nerves. Everything they'd worked for came down to the next hour. The evidence was assembled, the authorities were ready, and their plan was as solid as they could make it. Now they just had to execute it perfectly, knowing that any mistake could cost them everything. The quarry's floodlights created an orange glow against the pre-dawn sky as Bram drove toward the main gate. In his rearview mirror, he could just make out the distant shape of Nora's car turning onto the service road. They were committed now, No turning back. The gate's keypad glowed green in the darkness. Bram punched in the code he'd used during the sting, holding his breath. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a mechanical whir, the gate began to slide open, step 1 complete. Now came the hard part. The night shift security guard barely glanced at his credentials, waving him through with a sleepy nod. Bram forced himself to drive casually, fighting the urge to race toward the office building. Everything depended on appearing normal until the last possible moment. His phone vibrated. A message from Nora. In position. Cameras ready. Bram parked near the office, taking a deep breath to steady himself. Through the chain-link fencing, he could see movement in the kennels. Dark shapes of dogs pacing, waiting for their morning feeding. Somewhere in there was Y6, marking off what could be his final minutes. The breaker panel waited inside, unguarded. One flip of a switch would set everything in motion. Bram checked his watch one last time. 5:32 a.m. Dawn was coming. It was time to act. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around Bram like a heavy blanket as he crouched near the quarry's electrical panel. His hands were steady, but his heart thundered in his chest. The metal box felt cold against his fingers as he carefully pried it open. Years of working with machinery had taught him exactly what to look for. Behind him, the quarry's buildings loomed silent and dark. Somewhere inside, Y6 waited, along with dozens of other innocent victims. Bram thought of the tiny pup's trembling form, the branded ear that had started it all. He couldn't fail now. In position. Nora's whispered voice came through his earpiece. She was parked just outside the fence line, phone ready to stream everything live to Caraway. Cameras are good to go. Bram took a deep breath. Starting now. With practiced movements, he located the main breaker and yanked it down. The compound plunged into absolute darkness as security lights winked out. Emergency systems kicked in with a whine, and then, exactly as planned, the sprinklers burst to life. Chaos erupted inside the buildings. Shouts echoed as handlers scrambled in the sudden downpour. The magnetic locks on the kennel doors, designed to fail open in emergencies, released with metallic clicks. Dogs began barking, dozens of them. "Moving in!" Bram muttered, using the confusion to slip through a side door. Water drummed on the metal roof and streamed down concrete walls. His boots splashed through puddles as he navigated the familiar route to the intake room. The dog's barking grew louder, more frantic. Through the darkness he heard cursing and the sound of people slipping on wet floors. A flashlight beam cut through the gloom ahead. Bram pressed himself against the wall, holding his breath as two handlers rushed past, more concerned with escaping the indoor rain than securing the facility. The intake room door stood ajar, emergency lighting casting an eerie glow inside. Bram's heart clenched when he saw the small cage where Y6 huddled, soaked and shivering. But before he could reach it, a familiar voice stopped him cold. "Don't move another step, Whitaker." Sheriff Mott stood in the doorway, gun leveled at Bram's chest. Water dripped from his uniform, but his aim was rock steady. His face twisted with contempt. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Mott's voice was deadly quiet despite the chaos around them. "Had to play hero. Now look where it's got you." Bram's mind raced, but his voice remained calm. "It's over, Sheriff. The AG has everything. The footage, the books, the branded dogs. You can't cover this up anymore." "Shut up!" Mott's finger tightened on the trigger. "Back away from that cage." Instead, Bram moved closer to Y6, positioning himself between the gun and the trembling puppy. Water streamed down his face, but his eyes never left Mott's. "I won't let you hurt him again," Bram said firmly. "You'll have to shoot me first." Through his earpiece, he could hear Nora's sharp intake of breath. Her voice was tight with fear as she whispered, "A G units are 3 minutes out. Just hold on." Mott's face contorted with rage. "You think I won't?" "You're nothing but a washed-up tower who couldn't save his own father. What makes you think you can save anyone else?" The words were meant to cut deep, but Bram stood his ground. "Because someone has to stand up. Someone has to say enough. Touching, a new voice cut in. Silas Dree appeared behind Mott, his expensive suit darkened with water spots. But ultimately futile. Sheriff, end this nonsense. Bram's hand found the cage door, fingers curling around the latch. Six pressed against his touch, whimpering softly. You can't kill everyone who tries to stop you, Silas. There will always be someone else who sees the truth. Actually, Dree smiled coldly, we can. And we'll start with you, and that worthless mutt. Suddenly, blazing lights flooded the compound from outside. A voice boomed through megaphones. This is the Attorney General's task force. The facility is surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Mott's gun wavered. Dree's smile vanished. Through his earpiece, Bram heard Carraway's satisfied voice. Well done, children. The cavalry has arrived. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Mott swung his gun toward Dree, perhaps hoping to eliminate his partner before making a deal. Dree lunged for the weapon. Bram yanked open Y6's cage and gathered the pup close, shielding him with his body as the gun went off. The bullet struck concrete as task force agents poured in from multiple directions, weapons drawn. Drop the gun! On your knees! Hands where we can see them! Mott and Dree were forced to the ground, handcuffs clicking shut around their wrists. Nora burst in, phone still recording, and ran to Bram. Her free hand found his arm, squeezing tight as they watched justice finally arrive. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Agents documented everything. Ledgers showing falsified euthanasia records, medical supplies used to drug dogs, branded animals still in their cages. Veterinary teams arrived to evaluate and treat the survivors. Through it all, Y6 remained curled in Bram's arms, no longer trembling. Days turned into weeks as the case moved through the justice system. The evidence was overwhelming. Dree's operation had spanned years, involving insurance fraud, animal abuse, and corruption at multiple levels. The convictions, when they came, were heavy. Dree and Mott faced significant prison time. Other conspirators made deals to testify, exposing the full scope of the scheme. On a quiet morning at the courthouse, Bram signed the final adoption papers. The small pup who had started everything was officially his, now bearing a new name. Yarrow. The Y was no longer a brand of suffering, but a symbol of survival. It suits him, Nora said softly, watching Yarrow explore his new collar. She had become a constant presence in Bram's life, their shared battle creating something deeper than either had expected. The towing company, facing public pressure, not only restored Bram's contract, but offered him a promotion. He accepted the contract, but declined the promotion. Some things were more important than climbing ladders. Later that day, Bram stood at his father's grave, Yarrow sitting quietly beside him. The autumn wind rustled through nearby trees as he spoke words that had been building in his heart. I understand now, Dad, he said quietly. Why you always stopped to help, even when it wasn't convenient. Why you taught me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. He touched the headstone gently. I promise to keep stepping in when others won't. To be the person who makes a difference, even if it's just for one life at a time. Yarrow leaned against his leg, offering silent support. The pup who had once huddled, terrified on a storm-swept ledge, now stood tall, secure in his newfound safety. As the sun began to set, Bram drove home, to where Nora waited with dinner and plans for expanding the local shelter's oversight program. Yarrow curled up in his favorite spot by the fireplace, finally able to sleep without fear. Watching him, Bram felt a deep sense of peace. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest choices, stopping on a rainy night, refusing to look away, standing firm when it would be easier to surrender. The evening settled around them like a blessing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. But for now, in this quiet moment, justice had prevailed. Love had won. And a small pup named Yarrow dreamed sweet dreams, safe at last. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.